Hey, Internet friends, welcome to another day at Synergy Cafe. Here we are. It's a funky Friday, and I'm here in Friendly Fridley, and I've got some new guests on today. They had some technical difficulties, but they figured it out because persistence brings virtue. And I'm going to go get them. It's Gail and Gregory, and their last name, I believe it's pronounced Hog, but I'm not sure, so I'm going to ask them. Let's go get them. They're in the green room enjoying some of our delicious digital hors d'oeuvres. Are you there? Good day.
We are.
Hi, Brad.
And
How are
I
you?
prefer Hogue. It sounds less like a pig.
Oh, you're going to have to get a little closer together because right now,
Oh, is that?
there he is. That's right. You guys
Okay.
are married, right?
For
All
a
the-
long time.
Okay, then you can get closer. It's okay. Perfect. Dun-dun-dun. Not that close.
What kind of a show is this anyway?
I'm telling you, this is rated.
Oh,
I don't know. It's rated whatever.
good.
People that don't enjoy it, they can just click that button and leave. That's my take on it.
Well,
Okay.
Then let's have fun.
Yeah. So you guys are out on the west side of the United States, aren't you, in Colorado?
We
We-
are. In fact, it was just snowing about 30 minutes ago.
Oh, there you go. We had some of that here. We had a very mild winter in Minnesota, but normally we get dumped on, but we had a very mild one. So we're all okay. We can handle it.
Good.
But today we're going to talk about this right here, sacred geometry. And I used to go to a church that there was a guy there, then that's all he talked about was sound and sacred geometry. And I'm going to tell a quick, interesting story you guys might be interested in.
Okay.
I was at that church and we were in meditation, and my meditation ended up having this honeycomb thing going on. And then I didn't want to stay there. I went to another church, and the presentation was on bees and the honeycomb. I went back to the other church, and they had a thing going on, and their presentation was about bees and honeycomb. Isn't that cool?
That's
Well,
very unusual.
it sounds like you're the cool one that you, I'm sure, tried to figure out how did I tune in so well, and can I do that again?
And more importantly, what's the message?
Yeah, it was
Something
in
was to
that.
get your attention.
It was in that sacred geometry thing about the. Is it an octagon in honeycomb?
It's a hexagon.
Hexagon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Because
that's
when you
something to do with
yeah.
that. Because you ever heard of Jonathan Goldman?
He's a good friend of ours.
Oh, okay. He was there.
That's
presentation.
why
That was it. There's the connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we've
so
been
let's-
friends
let's-
with Jonathan for about 40 years.
Okay.
So long time.
Jim Albani was the other guy that was orchestrating it there in Minneapolis.
Huh. That sounds
Haven't seen him
familiar.
Anyway, so he's a very good friend with Jonathan as well. That's how
Mhm.
Jonathan got there at the Lake Harriet Spiritual Community.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you guys dabble in. I think you do a lot of other things, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and maybe how long you've been involved with this thing? How long have you guys been married?
38 years.
39 this year.
39. Oh,
We're going on our 39th year.
Yeah.
We've
Woo.
been working with sacred geometry for all 39 of that. And we don't just dabble in it. This is totally what we do in our life.
In fact, it was very interesting, Brad. The way that we met was that I had moved to Boulder, Colorado about a year and a half before. And I had always been very interested in the work of Buckminster Fuller. And I'm guessing you know his work since you're using the word synergy, because he's, somebody who
Be
has
more straight.
Oh, I can be more straight now. He's somebody that worked with, his book was called Synergetics, and he understood that synergy is really about when you bring all the parts together, they're greater than the whole is greater than the parts would ever have been able to equate to from what you could see.
Right.
Anyhow, Fuller was also, he liked to look at the tetrahedrons and put a lot of that in his books. That's a three-dimensional triangle. I met Gregory one day. I had just, I was working in a studio that a friend of mine had bought a house that Gregory had sold. And I had paintings that were being shipped in from New York. He had a big old table that was in the garage. And we met there, and he was carrying around this box of sacred geometry structures that had all these tetrahedrons. And I said, "Oh, you must know the work of Buckminster Fuller." And he said, "No, actually, I don't." Well, I had been intuitively working with Fuller, actually had asked after he passed if he would share his wisdom with me, his knowledge with me. And so when I would sit in meditation, after I asked a number of times, he would come to me. I'd get all this information. It was getting more and more scientific. I don't have a science background. And so I stopped and said, this is beyond what I can really do anything valuable with. So if you want to keep sharing this with me, bring me somebody that we could do something with together. And it was maybe just like another few weeks that I bumped into Gregory carrying around all these tetrahedrons. And from there, we knew almost immediately that we had work to do together. We had a real soul commitment that we started on back then in 1985.
It's a wonderful story. I love all those serendipities. And if you just keep tuned into these little frequencies, I think that things are coming together. Two energies come together, and all of a sudden they travel together for a while. It's sort of that vortex, if you will. I believe that that's where deja vu comes from. It's the realignment of the molecules in this infinite world we live in, or infinite universe. That's what kind of happens.
And, I consider serendipity the natural order of things. It's what we can be in all the time, depending on how well we're connected. So connected to higher self, connected to the bigger part of our being, because we're multidimensional beings, and our emotions hang out on a particular dimensional level, as does our mental body. And so when we start connecting to the fullness of our being, we can then start having that energy from soul come moving through all the time. And you see how universe is constantly offering us opportunities. And our biggest issue is just allowing them to come into our life.
Yeah.
And so
it's like the tuning in, like a radio. You got to fine tune it. Remember back when it wasn't just push button thing, you had to tune it into the right thing. I was at a Deepak Chopra event, and he was talking about, in this teeny tiny little space right there is your cell phone, my cell phone, all the pagers, all the radio equipment from the fire engines, ambulances, and the police cars, and all the different radios and the TVs. You just got to figure out the right receptor to tune into it, and you get all that information.
Exactly.
The hard part is tuning into it.
And then you understand that we live in a vibrational universe.
Yeah.
And it's all based on these different frequencies. So wherever we tune into those frequencies, that's where we are going to show up. It's really pretty simple that way. But our challenge is, how do we get our frequency to be in that place where we really want to live?
That's was my next question. I was going to ask, how do you do that? How do you tune that in with all the noise that's on the internet and all the stuff that's when you're in the city instead of in nature? You hear all these bah, bah, and people yelling at each other. How do you tune in to something like peace, love, and happiness?
That's exactly what we've been working on for the last 40 years. And you see, there are many things that disrupt our consciousness. It's, as you mentioned, EMFs, all the traffic, the computers, the toxins in the environment do that. Our own fears do that. They disconnect us totally from higher self. And also our judgments and our belief systems. So what we have been doing is looking at how universe creates its reality. I mean, there are particular patterns and rhythms and cycles that when we look out at nature, that you mentioned before, when we're in nature, it feels right because nature is doing it right. It is following the patterns and the way things grow and the way things are constantly looking around here. I've got all my things changed today. Um, here, when we look at nature, we see that it follows very particular patterns, as does the sun, as does the moon and the earth, and even the geometries that we find with light are moving around us. And so what we do is we build structures, antenna systems that relate to the way, say, the sun and the moon work together. And then that geometry, when it's we put it into a pendant people can wear, or we have it in an environment like, I guess you can't see it behind me now because I got little, but when we have those geometries around us, it's like being in nature, because it's what nature is doing naturally. The sun shining down through the trees when you're next to a stream with a breeze coming through and you feel connected, you can have that same sense of connection by going to the exact geometries that are relating to the sun and the trees and the water.
It's kind of like you can't put a square peg in a round hole.
And we're all the square pegs running around on this planet looking for holes to jump into.
Because it's like the tuning fork kind of thing where you and it acclimates and it takes on the other vibration and they both kind of get along. But a lot of people don't get along. Like our political party right now. Why don't you guys resonate at the same frequency and you probably come up with a solution instead of competing against each other?
Well,
good point.
It's true. And we have to start somewhere. And I think the important thing is for each of us to start with ourselves. You know,
like you mentioned, you do things like you make pendants and things like that. If a person is wearing that kind of jewelry and they start vibrating at a different frequency, they may have an ear to hear someone else's opinion. But when they're stuck in their thing, they can't hear anything. They're kind of like blocked off. They're very closed-minded.
That's so true. That's so true, Brad. And, you know, sometimes we are just operating so much on automatic pilot that we don't stop and realize that we're more than that little brain that wants to just kind of regurgitate whatever's been going on around us. So instead, what's really important is for us to be able to maintain that connection, take that moment, connect into our higher self so that we're incorporating so much of who we are. This physical realm is just a very small fraction of who we are. So why not expand into all the levels that we truly are here to work with?
Yeah, kind of like your website here. How did you come up with that name? IConnectToAll.com. How did you come up with that name?
Well, you know, it was interesting. When we were looking for what URL to use, most of the URLs that had sacred geometry in it were already taken. So we had to get a little more creative and think, well, what are we really doing? We're talking about connection. We're talking about connecting to all that is. So, oh, I should be back here. So that's kind of the way that we did it. And the number 2 was one of the ways that we could actually get that URL at that point and also make it kind of look like it made sense and was a little more fun that way.
It does make sense. And it makes sense too, because now you're not competing with all the other sacred geometry sites.
Yes, yes.
And when I was talking about, let's see, that's one of the pendants that we're talking about.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's almost got the Seed of Life thing in it too, doesn't it?
Almost, but it's going beyond that. You know, Seed of Life is a 2-dimensional thing. This is a representation of a 3-dimensional geometry that is, let me bring you back to us here. You see, it's this geometry right here in between us that's spinning. And that particular geometry, if you add up the number of degrees on its surface, you're going to have the same number of degrees when you turn it into miles as the diameter of the moon with the diameter of the sun. I
Wow.
drop the sun by a couple magnitudes, drop off a couple zeros, because zeros don't change the frequency of a number. 10, 100, 1,000 all resonate with each other,
Right.
just adding zeros to them. So that's what I did with the sun and the earth. And this is one of the geometries that comes out.
Wow.
And the one underneath, that is working with something called the phi ratio, and the moon and the earth. Those diameters also add up to the same number of degrees in that geometry.
Yeah, it's interesting how the geometric element falls in with the numerical element and like the golden mean and all that kind of stuff. I was no good in math when I was in school, that's for sure. But I kind of get how, it starts with nothingness, and then all of a sudden the universe says, I want to see myself. And it creates this one and goes, I'm lonely. I think I want to have another. And then you got two, says, hey, we should get together and make a three. We did. And look, we got society.
And it's a very precise action. I mean, you're saying something that is basically the way everything in universe works. And so that's important to understand, that we have the choice to follow the patterns of universe, which works with time as well. It's amazing. Time and space all revolve around the number 6 and the base 60 system. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes to an hour. And I can show you so many geometries. And we do that in our book, our new book on sacred geometry. We show how time and space and measure, like planets and all the platonic solids, I was going to say the octagon or octahedron and the cube and the tetrahedron, the dodecahedron, icosahedron, they all dance together. And when you add the right numbers up, they also equal the diameter of the moon and the earth and the sun. And so there's a resonance there. That means that if we bring things like that into our lives, it's like sitting next to the stream in the sunshine that we were talking about, while we're still in the city with all the concrete and with the lack of nature. We can still be vibrating with that feeling of nature.
Right.
And that shifts the way we think. It shifts our ability to tune in to higher self, so that we can actually start to connect to soul and get information. And that's what we've been doing. That's why I was carrying around that box of geometry so many years ago. And I didn't know who Buckminster Fuller was, because I wasn't studying geometry. I didn't know anything about it. I was simply building what I was seeing, because I had gone through something called Kundalini, which opened up all of my chakras. Some of it was very painful, because I had holes being burned in my hands and in my feet, because there was so much energy moving through my body. But eventually I could start to communicate with higher dimensional beings, and they started showing me all these geometries to bring into this world so that we could connect to what's real.
Yeah, I've taken a lot of those things like the disc profile and the Myers-Briggs and all that kind of stuff. And then my wife is a shaman, and she also studied numerology, and she put me through a numerology profile thing. And I was amazed at how aligned it was with who I was. The only thing that didn't make a connection was music, but I'm trying to still figure out what is it that music should be in my life And it's probably because music is kind of mathematical.
If you love math, music is totally mathematical. And there's a lot going on right now. If you're paying attention to music, well, there's an argument about the tonal scale. Should we set middle A at 432 or 440 hertz? That's the frequency of it. And the thing is, 432, when we use that number, then we're taking music into the realm where it's in resonance with the way the whole energy spectrum works.
Wow.
Because you see, everything in the energy spectrum is carried by the photon. That's the carrier. And a few years ago, what happened is two Polish scientists discovered the geometry of a photon. And I looked at that geometry and recognized that it's a star tetrahedron. And what that means is when you build it and then take all the degrees on the surface, it adds up to 4,320. So there's your 432. And that also happens to be the radius of the sun, which produces the photons. 432,000 miles is the radius of the sun. And 432 squared, when you do that, multiply it by itself, it's within 0.02% of what Einstein predicted the speed of light to be.
Wow.
So you see how light, everything that's around us, that's energy, how it all is resonating in a harmonic sense, just like you were talking about, Brad, with the tuning forks, that if you play a C tone, then the tuning fork that's set to go off at C will start to vibrate.
Mhm.
And so that's what's happening. We vibrate with all these rhythms around us. And when we bring in natural geometries and natural rhythms, it shifts our vibration. And boy, it feels good to vibrate the way the world and the way nature and the way everything in creation is set to vibrate. We've stepped out of it because we're human beings that have believed we can do anything we want.
So we got to loosen up a little bit.
Yeah, we forget. A lot of the ancient people and civilizations have built churches, the pyramid, working with Stonehenge, so many different things that reflect a natural order in their building process so people could connect more to what's real in themselves.
It's interesting. I love talking about this because we're in, as we started our conversation at the beginning, we're in a time where there's so much disconnection. All the things around us, whether it's microwaves and 5Gs, EMFs, toxins, anger, fear, all of those things are constantly playing to disconnect us from who we are and our relationship to the universe. And
Sure.
one of the things that I love about our book is that we talk about how, we're living in a universe that's not just random. There is precision, there's consciousness in it, there's a structure that everything follows, whether it's, that bee that you were talking about in the honeycomb, the way that our bodies are created, the way that all life forms manifest. There's real order to it. And, when I think about that, it helps me to remember that we belong here. We're part of something that's not just tossing us around, but we're part of an order that when we understand that, when we resonate with it, we can feel so much more connected and move outside of all of the things that cause that disconnection. So, it's really important to understand our roots and the foundation of consciousness itself. There is very beautiful structure within everything.
Well, it got my gears turning, that's for sure. So we've gone for about 25 minutes. I try and keep these a little consumable time. Now, you mentioned a book. Now, is this available on your website here?
It is. It's available on our website. In fact, if people would like to get a free chapter, we're giving away our first chapter 1, which is about consciousness. And if they go to iconnecttoall.com/chapter, they'll get to a page where they can download a free chapter, learn more about what we're up to, and I think they'll just love it. It's a really fun chapter. And we've always looked at sacred geometry as an entry point to how we can affect consciousness. So starting our book with our talking about consciousness was, kind of the way that we do things.
Got it. Well, this has been whole bunches of fun. Again, it's got my mind turning again, back in the olden days. So I'm going to put you into the green room. We can have a little conversation after if you have time. And other than that, I'm going to sign this one off. I appreciate you guys sharing with what you got here. And so do you make the jewelry and the
We make everything. We have the equipment to punch out all the stainless steel, and so we have micro soldering things going on, a lot of stuff. We do the welding of the geometries.
Everything
We
is
make
handmade.
all of this
Yeah. it's
by
all
hand.
on the website there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, check it out.
Well, Gail and Gregory, thank you very much. I'm going to pop you in the green room, and I do have some digital hors d'oeuvres in there. They're very low cal, but feel free to have as many of the cookies as you'd like. They're very tasty.
Great.
Appreciate you being on the show on Synergy Cafe. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Brad. It's been a fun day.
Well, there you have it. Another day on Synergy Cafe. Isn't that some interesting, enlightening stuff? I know I used to be more involved with all these things. We used to have an expo up here, the Edge Life Expo, and then Gary Beckman passed away and his wife passed away, and now it's taken over, but it's not the same as it used to be. Well, that's all I've got for you today. So I hope you enjoyed the show. Please like, comment, share, ask any questions you'd like, and tune back in. Enjoy the rest of your day. Be good, be kind, be nice. Did I say be nice?